Greetings, I'm Cam Miller, and this is Team 99, a look back at the 1999 Cincinnati Reds on the 25th anniversary of their improbable season. Remember, if you have a memory or story you'd like to share of the 99 Club, email me at riverfrontcam@gmail.com, and I'll be reading them throughout the season. This is episode 4, The Mayor and the Pen. On Sunday, May the 2nd, after the Braves had swept the Reds at Turner Field, Greg Vaughn gathered his teammates around for an impromptu team meeting. Now, he didn't lash out at anybody or point fingers at anybody specifically, but he did tell his teammates that everyone had a part in the recent struggles. And then he pointed the finger to himself and said everyone had to take accountability. After all, the heart of the batting order of Dmitri Young, Barry Larkin, and Greg Vaughn were hitting .194 with 8 home runs and 25 RBIs amongst them, so they were struggling. And on May 14th, 32 games into the season, the Reds were 14-18 in last place, 7 games back. If there was one player on the Reds who you could say was doing his part, it was Sean Casey. Casey was having a torrid start to the season. How torrid? Well, on May 14th, the Reds lost 7-3 to the Padres, but Casey went 4 for 4, including his 6th home run of the year. And oh, by the way, he was batting .393, which was leading the league. Sean Casey, who in 1998 came back from his awful eye injury to hit in the 130s, gets sent down and then called back up to hit over .300 after the 1998 All-Star break, had finally found his groove. He was a hitting machine. I think the best way to tell you about Casey is by reading from this article. This is from the Cincinnati Post on May 25th, 1999. To know Sean Casey is to know Frank Porco. When Casey needs to get his swing in line, he calls Frank. The 53-year-old Porco is a hitting guru to kids in the Upper St. Clair, Bethel Park area. About 11 years ago, Porco was working with Tony Rispanti, a sophomore at Upper St. Clair. Tony asked Porco if he would mind taking on one more customer, a teammate, a buddy of his who was hitting less than .200, as a sophomore on the junior varsity team. Porco agreed. The next week, in came a chubby 14-year-old with the big league dreams, and Porco and Sean Casey went to work, once a week at first. But Casey, he'd be there every day saying, "Come over here," Porco recalled. "Am I doing this right? Am I doing this right?" I never saw a kid work as hard as Sean. Casey's batting average jumped nearly 300 points between his sophomore and junior seasons. Porco had a pupil for life. When he went to college at the University of Richmond, during all the breaks, he would come down and work with me, Porco said. He'd call me up and say, "Are you going to be around?" And we'd work for a couple of days. That relationship continued through the minors. Casey was selected in the second round of the 1995 draft by the Cleveland Indians. His first full season in the minors at Class A Kinston, North Carolina, in 1996 ended with an ankle injury on July 23rd. He started in 1997 on the disabled list after tearing ligaments. When he got the doctor's clearing to hit again, Casey scheduled a meeting with Porco. And he said to me, "I've been playing ball all my life, and I've been thinking, is there anything to life other than baseball?" Porco said. We sat down in a back room and talked a little bit, and I said to him, "Maybe you don't need baseball, but baseball sure as heck needs you." I ripped the bandage off his wrist and said, "Let's get back to work," back in the cage. Casey was activated on June 8th. After hitting .386 in 62 games at Class AA Akron, he was promoted to Buffalo and in September to Cleveland. Frank was the biggest influence on me as a hitter, Casey said. He taught me that nothing comes easy, you know? I hit a lot. No one knew I hit as much as I did. My dad bought a solo hitter and put it in the garage, and I'd hit, and I'd hit, and I'd hit. I'd hit so much my gloves would be loose. I'd sweat so much. That's why I'm always pushing my gloves back. Porco and Casey talk by phone at least once a week. Casey has referred friends and former teammates to him. Porco's children, now grown, will call home excitedly when they see Casey highlights on TV. I've had some great moments in my life, Porco said. I met my wife, I had my kids, and I have my grandson, and I have Sean Casey. Every time he talks to me, before he hangs up, he says, "I love you, man." The feeling is mutual. So that was from May 25th, 1999, and Casey would continue to inspire throughout the season. But the Reds added some pitching depth to their bullpen in mid-May by calling up Ron Vallone and sending down Aaron Boone. From May the 3rd to May the 16th, the Reds were home for 11 games and went 6-4. But we started to see the new Red machine getting warmer. It was off to the west for 3-game sets against the Rockies, Padres, and Dodgers. They had just taken 2 or 3 from the Pods to wrap up the homestand before heading to Colorado. The Reds took the first game in Colorado 7-2, thanks to home runs by Vaughn and Casey, and Pete Harnish's 8 innings of 2-run baseball. The following day, the Reds won 5-3 when the aforementioned Sean Casey smacked a game-winning 2-run double in the ninth inning, and the Reds finally got back to 500. Why don't I let George Grant and the crafty left-hander Chris Welsh tell you all about it?
Here's Casey. High in the air to left, hit pretty good. Hit pretty good. It's going to be off the wall. Here comes Cameron. Here comes Larkin about 10 feet behind him. They're both coming to the plate. They'll both score. The Reds. Sean Casey has done it again. Casey drives both home. The Reds lead it 5-3. But Scott Williamson will hammer it down, and the Reds play comeback baseball again, trailing 3-0. They tied it at 3, and then Sean Casey set the stage with a double that knocks in 2 in the ninth, and the Reds win it 5-3. And Chris, it's a long road, but the Reds are finally at 500 for the first time since May the 16th of last year.
It's a ball club that's beginning to feel pretty good about itself. They're celebrating their victories. They were awfully loose before the game today, but it took the big guy in the middle of the lineup, Sean Casey, number 21, to come through when it needed him most.
The Reds were back to 500, but it was the third game in that Rockies series that cemented the Reds in the record books. One of the game's greatest pitching duels, Cam said sarcastically. Reds 24, Rockies 12. It was an all-time record breaker. Let's look at some of the numbers. The 28 hits that the Reds had tied a club record from May 13th, 1902 versus Philadelphia. The 24 runs scored were too short of the club record that was set in 1911 against the Boston Braves. Sean Casey reached base 7 consecutive times. 2 homers, 2 singles, 3 walks. Also, there were 7 players that had 3 or more hits. Sean Casey, Jeffrey Hammonds, Mike Cameron, Greg Vaughn, Mark Lewis, Brian Johnson, and Pokey Reese, which tied a National League record. Sean Casey also set an RBI mark. He had 6. 4 times the Reds batted around in an inning, and at no point did the Reds or Rockies go down in order during the game. But of all of the stats in this crazy game, the one that sticks out to me the most is Jeffrey Hammonds. He had been struggling. He had 5 hits and no home runs going into the game, and he was hitting a paltry 132. But he had 4 hits, including 3 home runs, and was now hitting 205. So he jumped his batting average from 132 to 205 and had 3 home runs. Talk about a flip of a switch. The Reds then moved on to San Diego, where they took 2 of 3. In the second game of the series, Pete Harnisch continued his stellar pitching, going 7 innings and allowing only 2 hits. And oh, by the way, he clubbed a 2-run home run as the Reds won 3-0. They closed out the month of May, sitting at 25-22, only 3 games back. The offense was starting to come around. Sean Casey was having an MVP-like start. The starters were going deeper into games. But then there was the bullpen. Remember the bullpen, the much maligned bullpen at the beginning of the year? They got off to such a bad start. But now they were among the best in baseball. Scott Sullivan, Danny Graves, Gabe White, Denny Reyes, Ron Vallone, and rookie Scott Williamson. They were turning heads around the league. And Jack McKeon was loving it. Here's McKeon.
It's a unique situation, but I can get 3 innings out of any of those guys on a certain time. So basically, if our starter goes out in the 5th inning, I got 2 guys who can finish the game without going to 6 or 7 relievers.
Danny Graves.
It's good to have more than one guy out there to finish off a game, because I know if I don't have it one night, somebody else in the bullpen is going to come pick me up, and that's good to have.
Scott Williamson.
No one, has that title as a closer and put all the pressure on themselves. And, I think that's what's good, that, no one has that pressure and they go out there and do it easily and freely and with a confidence roll. I mean, it's hard to fail.
Here's Scott Sullivan.
A lot of the guys in our bullpen come in and throw 95, 96 miles an hour, and they blow people away, and I try to go in there and trick them, but it does give a different look.
The late, great Don Gullett.
We've got a great contrast in the bullpen. We've got 3 left-handers down there that do different things. We got a sidearm pitcher, we got a sinker ball pitcher, and we got a power pitcher, and we can throw them a lot of different looks.
So now we finally see the Reds are starting to turn the corner, and here we go. And the summer of '99 is about to begin. Let's read an email. This comes from Greg Otten. Cam, thanks for bringing the 1999 team some deserved attention. Definitely my favorite non-playoff team of my 46 years, with last year coming a close second. I have 3 very different stories that can be shared, none of them by any significant length. The first is a warm September night in the middle of the week, and I'm not sure of what day it was, but I was called in as a last-minute replacement for my brother's softball team down on Kellogg Avenue near Coney Island. The Reds were fighting for every win, and despite several softball games being played concurrently on all of the available fields, the park managed to pipe Marty and Joe through the PA system, and when the Reds scored or when we heard the Astros lost, an entire park full of middle-aged softball players erupted in simultaneous cheers, despite the status of their own titanic struggles. Chills thinking of that memory. The second is that fateful last weekend in Milwaukee. My first job out of college that summer was working with a photography company whose sole purpose was to go to homes and take the first third-month photos of newborn babies after they had scheduled it at the hospital. So on the Saturday afternoon, I had to reluctantly agree to work, even though I desperately wanted to follow every pitch from the recently acquired Juan Guzman for the late afternoon game. Luckily, the father of the newborn I was set up to photograph was equally interested, so he had the TV on. However, this meant that what was normally a 30-minute visit was leaking into the 1-hour range as we kept pausing to watch the slow-rolling disaster that included Mike Cameron getting injured and playing his last game as a Red. It also meant that the poor mother was left to do a lot of my job, but luckily, I got what I needed and escaped before real daggers emerged from her eyes to get me and the father. Finally, the day of excitement that ended in depression, the wildcard game. Monday, April 5th. I was dating my now wife and visiting her at her family home near Akron. I made the plan to pull out of the driveway on the first pitch and listen to the game because I was too nervous to watch it in full. As I headed down I-71, the roar of the sold-out Riverfront Synergy behind Marty and Joe was palpable. In fact, in my mind, this crowd stands out as the turning point between the old-school loud baseball crowds versus the more new-school roars that somehow seem more energetic and, dare I say, football-esque. Despite Leiter's dominance, there was a persistent feeling, even to the final out, that there would be a comeback, and the dream ride would continue. The previous week, I had purchased 5 tickets for myself, my brothers, and our dad for the first playoff game to be played at home, so the whole drive was anticipation for that trip. But by the time I had pulled into my parents' house in Reading, the post-game show was on, and the somber tones were evident. Yet the good feelings of the previous 162 games almost instantly eliminated much of the pain of Game 163, and that feeling about this 1999 team remains to this day. A huge what-if could hang over them forever, but the exuberance of Griffey's arrival overshadowed the loss as well as the fact that I was getting married in the summer of 2000, so that 1999 team gets to live in the rarest categories in life, the successful failure. The ride was worth the disappointing end. I think so fondly of the time that in the few weeks after the season ended, we had to go to a lender-owned bank to get a full refund for the playoff tickets that I made a special request of the banker to make a photocopy of the tickets so I could have some sort of keepsake. I'm not sure where that copy is now, but I'm certain that the memories are still strong. Thanks for your time and efforts, Greg Otten. Greg, thank you so much. That's a really cool email. As I often say, enjoy the moments you have. Enjoy the team that you rooted for as a 9-year-old. Enjoy the team that you root for in your 30s. Enjoy the team you root for in your 50s and on. There's always going to be special moments peppered into those seasons, even when they might be a failure in your eyes or in the public's eyes or in fandom's eyes. Remember that those moments make up things that you're going to talk about for the rest of your life. So appreciate them. I know I do. I'm Cam Miller. Thanks for listening.